So Friday, the anniversary, first anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine. We've been talking, I know, so much about is it the trigger for a new big Russian offensive. But now part of that conversation, Richard, is have they got the capacity for very much of a fresh offensive? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we have to take what the Russians say they've done at face value. It would appear that they have coerced, conscripted, by one means or another, put a large number of their rather reluctant citizens into uniform, given them some rudimentary training, and show every inclination to throw them into the battle. So I think we will see some form of further offensive by the Russians.
Mm.
But on the evidence of all that we've seen so far over the last war, I'm afraid this is condemned to being a very bloody failure and a tragedy for many hundreds, thousands, probably tens of thousands of Russian families.
Yes, I mean,
I think we'll see massed infantry attacks supported by artillery, and it will lead to great loss of life.
I saw an assessment today, Richard, that 150,000 Russians were thrown into the invasion a year ago this week. Since then, 150,000 Russians have been killed or wounded or gone missing. There must be a limit to the capacity of the Russian military to throw men into what they call the meat grinder, the flesh grinder, before their military machine stutters and fails, at least in part.
Well, I completely agree with you, and you would have thought that any normal, vaguely open society would have begun to count the cost internally of what their leadership has been putting them and is putting them through. But we know from all the sources of information that are available to us that the Kremlin does control almost all, if not all, the state media. They have been very careful to try and camouflage the extent of the casualties. We learned early in the war that they deployed forward crematoria into forward positions so that it wasn't a question of many hundreds of body bags going back. It was just information being told to families that their loved one had been lost.
Yes,
So,
yes.
I mean, it is revolting, really, what is going on. And frankly, John, I think we could all recognize in the 21st century in Europe, this should not be happening. And therefore, President Biden, Rishi Sunak, all other decent Western leaders should be absolutely doing their utmost to make sure the Ukrainians are supported to the maximum degree possible and that this war is ended on the battlefield successfully for Ukraine as quickly as possible. And I think it's possible to do that.
And when you say successfully for Ukraine, what does that outcome look like now for you at this stage, a year in?
Well, let's accept that the negotiating positions, if negotiations were to start, of Putin and Zelensky are mutually irreconcilable. One wants his whole country completely back under Ukrainian control, and that's entirely legitimate. The other wants to own and control a part of Ukraine. That is illegitimate. So their positions are irreconcilable. And therefore, it means that the resolution of this conflict has got to be on the battlefield. And if we just look at the way the battle has ebbed and flowed, but mostly flowed in the favor of the Ukrainians through their determination, their guts, their hard work, and the support of the West over the last year. Yes, I think we will see another offensive by the Russians, but as we were saying a few minutes ago, it'll be characterized by mass infantry attacks supported by pretty dumb artillery, and many hundreds, thousands of Russians will lose their lives. It's at that moment, in the spring or early summer, that the Ukrainians must take advantage of the weaponry that's being provided to them and mount a carefully planned and thought through counter-offensive to strike some decisive blows at the Russians. Because let's face it, the morale of the Russian soldier is very, very fragile at the present moment. Strike him hard and he will believe in his head that he's lost. And when a soldier thinks he's lost, he has lost. And that will actually break up the Russian army and change the dynamic on the battlefield.
Yeah, but that's a process that's a process that could stretch on for, well, a very long time.
Well, it could do, but my point is that if a counteroffensive properly prepared, planned, thought through at the operational level, a proper campaign of battles and engagements is put into place by the Ukrainians with the additional modern weaponry that they are being provided by the West, there is the chance that they could crack the morale of the Russian soldier and break the backbone of the Russian army. And then whatever the generals might decide they want to do, frankly, they'll be powerless because the soldiers will vote with their feet.
Well, Well, I'm John Pienaar, and if you found that interesting, we are here each day, Monday to Thursday, 5 o'clock till 7 o'clock on Drive, and from 7 till 8, Pienaar and Friends, where we discuss the big stories of the day each day on Times Radio.